All right, let's now talk about trains and state capture and the road or the line to recovery. The Passenger Rail Agency of South Africa is set to feature in this fifth and final report. One of the most infamous tenders by Prasa, we were discussing earlier, resulted in the procurement of those 2 trawl trains. In part 2 of the state capture report, now Chief Justice Raymond Zondo detailed how Transnet became the site of extensive looting by the Guptas. It outlined a litany of corrupt deals, including the procurement of more than 1,000 trains involving a Chinese manufacturer believed to have paid very large bribes. The Commission found there were reasonable grounds for former CEO Brian Molefe to be held liable for taking kickbacks and helping to advance the Gupta enterprise. It implicated him and others. To discuss, we're now joined by Mesela Nhlapo, CEO of African Rail Industry Association. Mr. Nhlapo, thank you so much for being with us. Do you agree with Justice Zondo that Transnet was, in a sense, the principal site of state capture? So the end goal was Treasury, but a lot of the looting happened at Transnet.
Look, I think the Zondo Commission had facts that may not necessarily be available to me. But we know as an industry that the industry was seriously compromised during that time. And it was a period where the local content was supposed to revive the manufacturing sector, create jobs, bring in new blood into the system in terms of a transformation. And we also know that it has discredited the country of the investment that was made by the likes of the companies like Bremse, EOH. So there was an expectation from the international markets to ensure that we are a building ground as a rail industry and looking towards the continent. So what is revealed in the state capture report, I don't have full facts, but what I know on the ground is that the industry was seriously compromised, and it was further aggravated by COVID.
The upshot now is that we bemoan the fact that a lot of goods are transported by roads rather than rail, which makes it more expensive. We're already facing huge costs. And a lot of people don't have safe trains to travel to work on, so they have no alternative than to travel by taxi. What we're facing now as a country, how much of that would you attribute to state capture at Prasa and Transnet?
Look, for me, it's difficult to term it as state capture. I can only tell you facts of things that we have seen as an industry. One company that existed for more than 50 years has been liquidated. And it got to a point of liquidation because there were problems at 2 state-owned entities. The manufacturing sector and the transformation, the business, women-owned businesses have been seriously compromised. Some don't exist anymore because of the challenges that we've seen at both entities. And hence, it's important that as an industry, as a rail industry, including Prasa and Transnet, that there is a transformation and this structural reform of third-party access so that the industry does not rely on Prasa or Transnet for business, but actually the rand revolves around the industry itself rather than relying on 2 entities.
Well, let's talk about how they're doing now. Transnet, I think we've discussed before, sort of renting out tracks of, portions of the track. How is Transnet recovering from what has happened in the past? Call it state capture, just call it mismanagement, whatever you want. But how are they turning around?
Look, there's new management in place. The president had announced in October 2020 that there will be a structural reform, and you will find they encourage more private sector participation, of which it was a huge relief for the entire private sector in South Africa and international market as well. But where we find ourselves is that at the SONA, it was announced that from the 1st of April, we will start with third-party access. But unfortunately, the third-party access from the Transnet side has not been in compliance with the particular principles of consultation, transparency, openness. So we have never sat down with Transnet to define what this third-party access is. We've done our study, they've done their bit, but and what they term as slot allocation is actually in direct conflict with the national rail policy recently gazetted by Parliament.
Can you explain that? Why is it in direct conflict?
Well, for instance, the policy says that there will be access to all network core and non-core. And the Transnet bid says that only this piece will be available to the industry. It also has, the pricing mechanism, it should be clear, it should be public. And we must make sure that the people that have the capacity to transport goods by rail actually have the skills, or they can at least invest in the industry. But lastly, there is a 2-year contract. Rail is a capital-intensive environment. For me to buy a 50 train set, it will cost me over 200 million rands. And then there's also the manufacturing time lag that is required. So the uncertainty around what third-party access is from Transnet point of view, and the country, the Department of Transport point of view, that must be resolved by government. And the Minister Mbalula has assured us that the colleagues will be persuaded. So we hope that the third-party access will be applied in terms of the policy, and nothing more and nothing less.
And something you said earlier is worrying. You spoke about a lack of transparency, given kickbacks in the past, given claims that tenders were specifically designed to help the Guptas. What we really want to see now is transparency. So that is concerning. We're almost out of time. What about Prasa really trying to focus on these important corridors for passenger rail?
You know, the Prasa issue for me, I grew up in the townships and we took trains to everywhere. I'm from Guatemala, Johannesburg, Park Station, Baki. You know, it has a rich history, and it has an economy built around it. It has religious communities built around it. So it's in each and every one of us that we must fight for Prasa to work. I couldn't interview an intern because it's difficult for him to travel from point A to where I am. But if the trains were running, it would have made the job seeker easier for them to access the point where they're going to be interviewed or assessed for a health assessment in order for them to get employed. So for me, it's everybody in the industry, every South African, the vandalism that is taking place, it's taking place under our noses. And it is our responsibility to make sure that those that destroy our asset, the South African asset, are held accountable and punished by law.
Yeah, well, that really makes it real. The lack of passenger rail services linked to joblessness, linked to our economic woes. Thank you very much, Mesela Nhlapo, CEO of the African Rail Industry Association.